You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 27th of August 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Briefing in association with Addis. Hello and very warm welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting live from Studio 1 here at Midori House in London. I'm Chris Chermak. Coming up on today's programme.
Nobody goes into a war thinking they're going to lose. I'm sure that Ukraine thought they were going to win, but you don't go into a war that's 15 times your size.
Russia continues to make some small inroads in eastern Ukraine. We'll ask what sort of concessions Ukraine could make for peace, as Donald Trump would like to see, and what that would mean for Europe and its security. After that, we'll go broader to talk about European military recruitment drives with Monocle's Ed Stalker, who also brings us tales of the Venice Film Festival and tomatoes in Spain. And finally,
sometimes we'll be in the studio and we need like a second or third verse, and it's like pulling teeth. It's so difficult.
The band Saint-Étienne discussed their 13th and final upcoming album and why it's so hard to get the lyrics right sometimes. All that right here on The Briefing with me, Chris Chermak. Now, if last week marked a milestone of diplomacy since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began, with a flurry of major summits on US soil, this week has seen everyone sort of take a step back, consider what sort of peace deal they could actually live with. As Russia drags its feet and continues to make incursions in eastern Ukraine, one of the key questions is whether Kyiv could ever concede some of its sovereign territory in exchange for peace, and whether making peace with Russia gets them off the hook for the crimes they've committed during this ongoing war. I'm joined now from Kyiv by the lawyer Wayne Jordash, president of International Human Rights Foundation Global Rights Compliance, which supports Ukraine's Office of the Prosecutor General to document and prosecute Russian war crimes. Wayne, thanks very much for coming on the show. I think just already from introducing you and your title, it is easy to get lost in the high-minded talks of peace that have been going on right now in Ukraine, US, with Russia as well. What is the actual situation on the ground from your perspective?
Good afternoon, and thanks for having me. Well, I live in Ukraine, so I'm, and I have lived here for nearly 10 years, and so I understand, I think, a little bit about what's happening on the ground in terms of Russian aggression, but also in terms of what the average Ukrainian may be thinking about a peace agreement. I mean, the first thing I would say is I don't think anyone really believes it. I think everybody hopes for it, but I don't think anyone believes it. And coupled with that is, I think, the general mood, and this is borne out by recent studies, is that Ukraine should not be conceding territory. This is certainly a strong view held by a lot of the military, but I think a strong view held by a lot of the average person. After Russia invaded in 2014 and then ramped it up in 2022, they've been engaged in a widespread and systematic attack on civilians, and the military have sacrificed a lot. The Ukrainian people have sacrificed a lot. So when it comes to now conceding territory, which Russia certainly doesn't have and certainly doesn't deserve, I don't think that the mood is swinging in that direction.
And I understand, as you say, that this mood for territorial concession certainly doesn't exist in Ukraine. I mean, would that change at all if it were paired with sort of ironclad security guarantees that has been such a big part of this discussion as well? Or is there just a simple principle here that Russia should not get any of Ukraine's territory regardless of the situation on the ground?
Well, I think your question identifies the two main strains of thought. I mean, the strain of should or does international law even allow or legitimize any type of concession? And the answer is firmly no. The UN Charter makes it clear that territory seized by aggression does not allow title to move to that aggressor. any deal done, this is a matter of international law, which is what I am. Any deal done according to international law would be void in its entirety. And it doesn't matter if Ukraine agrees to it at this point in time. Forever and a day, that title remains as a matter of international law with Ukraine. You can't be forced to give up territory under the threat of gun and under the threat of violence against civilians and so on. And then that title legitimately shift to Russia, the aggressor. So that's the first point. And I would add to that, the obligations are at that point firmly on third states to prevent that situation happening and to prevent any shift of title. And that type of obligation can be met through such things as diplomatic action, sanctions, non-recognition of that shift of title, and so on and so forth. So that's the first thing. I mean, as a matter of principle, no territory cannot be conceded under these circumstances. But the second parallel thought, which was in your question, would Ukraine nonetheless make some at least notional sacrifices in that direction if they were to obtain ironclad security guarantees? And I think that neatly identifies where the real politique lies at this point in time. I think many people in Ukraine are tired of the war, understandably. They understand that Russia or Putin and the Kremlin and the Russians will tolerate a lot more and will continue to wreak havoc in Ukraine. And so security guarantees are number one priority in many ways. So if ironclad security guarantees came, I think then concessions could be made. What those concessions look like is the big question.
And one side of that as well would be what to do with the many, frankly, war crimes that you have been documenting or helping Ukraine document on its territory. What does accountability for that look like if there were to be some sort of peace deal agreed, as you were mentioning there, with some Ukrainian concessions? What would happen to the various war crime documentations, possible trials that you would hope to see?
Well, again, the answer to that can be divided into two: the principle and the practice. And the principle is very clear. Ukraine has an obligation to pursue those accountability for those crimes. The state has that obligation, as do third states. The crimes that Russian military and the Russian leadership have committed range from war crimes to crimes against humanity and possibly genocide. That means that we all have an obligation, or states across the world have an obligation to investigate and prosecute those crimes that occurred in Ukraine. So if perpetrators or alleged perpetrators arrived in the UK or arrived in wherever, third state, that third state has an obligation to investigate and prosecute them for those crimes. These are universal crimes, and this is universal jurisdiction. So any peace agreement wouldn't suddenly circumvent those obligations. A peace agreement couldn't, for example, enshrine non-accountability for these crimes. That would be, again, as with the concessions for territory, that would go to a fundamental issue of international law, which says that when these universal crimes are suspected of being committed, they have to be prosecuted, and they cannot be limited either by time or by some sort of peace agreement. That's the principle. I mean, the practice is, of course, quite different. US funding, I mean, my organization is funded by the UK, the EU, and the US, and the US funding may well stop. I mean, that's the nature of the Trump administration, and they are looking to decrease, as you probably know, as your listeners probably know, funding for foreign aid. And that is precisely what the funds we receive is classified as. So we don't know whether that will happen, but if it happens, it has a significant impact on our operations. We run mobile teams here of international and national lawyers which support the prosecution. That is an expensive business, security, legal fees, etc., etc. And so if the Americans pulled out of funding, then it's very difficult to continue at the same pace. And so, in light of the volume of the crimes committed by Russia, significant funding, significant resources is needed. And if it's not there, then that will have a significant impact on the ability of Ukraine to investigate and prosecute these crimes.
Wayne Jordash, President of the International Human Rights Foundation Global Rights Compliance, thank you very much for joining us. This is The Briefing, and now here's Tom Webb with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Chris. Denmark has summoned a top US diplomat in Copenhagen. The move follows reports that Americans carried out covert influence operations in Greenland to push for separation from Denmark. The foreign minister called the alleged interference unacceptable and warned of growing outside pressure on the Arctic territory. Taiwan's president has announced a major cabinet shake-up. 16 posts are changing hands as Lai Chang-te faces growing political setbacks and resistance from opposition lawmakers. The overhaul comes after votes rejected a key ruling party campaign, deepening fears of political deadlock. South Korea will ban phones and smart devices during school hours. Lawmakers passed a bill to curb addiction and to improve student performance, with the law to take effect in March 2026. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Tom. Feels like every country these days is banning phones in schools. Well, let's cross over now to Milan for a European news roundup, because we are joined by Monocle's very aptly titled Europe Editor-at-Large, Ed Stalker. Ed, good to have you on the show. How is the Italian summer treating you over there?
Good afternoon, Chris. Well, yes, I am one of the few people in Milan. Actually, people still seem to be on the beach. No, I joke, but I've been back at work for a few weeks now, and it was extremely quiet. There's hardly any traffic when I first came back. It's August.
What are you doing there?
But exactly, next, and you can't get anything done because everyone's like, no, they're on holiday. They won't reply. So next week is when it comes back. Suddenly, everyone will be back talking about their holidays, catching up on work. So it'll be crazy from next week.
Okay, and will they be excited when they return to talk about military recruitment? How's that for a segue, Ed? Everyone returning from holidays and
that is seamless,
feeling
isn't it?
like they might have to just go to the army.
I think it's probably on everyone's lips. It's a perfect topic of conversation. I think actually they were probably talking about it on Italian beaches.
I think they might be. Yeah, the dangers when they come back. But there is this serious point here that we do want to talk about, because Europe is frankly quite desperate to recruit people into its armies at the moment. How has that been going from your perspective?
Yeah, it's completely true. I think the armed forces have a bit of a crisis of identity. To put it frankly, it's not particularly seen as cool to join the army these days. I'm speaking pretty generally, but that is reflected in figures. The fact is that we have a geopolitical situation in which countries, not just in Europe but around the world, are looking to rearm, to up their defence spending. We have new members joining NATO, such as Sweden. We have countries committing to spend more of their GDP on defence in light of what's happening in the world, particularly Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So countries want to strengthen their armed forces, but they're faced with the problem of not being able to necessarily doing it via the traditional way that has become the norm in recent years, which is via recruitment. And therefore, countries around the world are looking at the potential of bringing back conscription. And it's in the news particularly because Germany is introducing this draft law today on military conscription, Chris.
It is. And I mean, what's interesting about this law, for example, from Germany is it's kind of conscription is still somewhat, at least for a country like Germany, a last resort, isn't it? So even this law will sort of start with more of a voluntary recruitment drive, but there is this option, a provision for conscription to be added if they can't reach the numbers that they want to reach. Is that something you're seeing in a lot of European countries these days? I mean, some countries have actually moved back to conscription.
Yeah, I mean, Chancellor Merz has been pretty outspoken about how he views Germany's role in the world, that Germany, as the strongest economy and most populous country in Europe, needs to have an army that reflects that, and its partners want that. So he has this ambition of Germany being the largest conventional army in Europe. And so they're looking at ways in order to achieve that. There are about 183,000 soldiers currently. They want to up that by at least 60,000. And so we're in the very, very early stages of that, Chris. It needs to be noted that this is a coalition of different players with different political views and different views, particularly with regards to conscription. But Boris Pistorius, the defence minister, is known to be a fan of the Swedish model, which is sort of, I guess in name, a voluntary model. Everyone receives a letter aged 18 and asked to respond to it. From there, basically people get whittled down. They go and attend an interview, get screened, and then a final number is invited to join. But it's voluntary. But if the needs of the army are not met through this, then it can move to a conscription model when people have to join up. But within the German government, the SP, the Social Democrats, for example, are known to be more skeptical of conscription. For now, the debate in Parliament is solely on a voluntary model, Chris.
Well, Ed, I wanted to get your take on a couple of other more fun stories. If Italians are coming back from their summer vacations, conscription is hilarious, Ed. Absolutely. I loved
I love it.
Our fun chat there. The Venice Film Festival is starting. Are Italians heading towards that?
Well, a lot of people are attending that. A lot of international stars are attending that. Kate Blanchett will be there. George Clooney, of course, he loves Italy. Emma Stone, just to name a few of the celebrity Hollywood stars who are going to be going down that red carpet this evening in Venice. It is, a mega event on the film calendar as people head to the island of Lido. There's, some really interesting things happening this year. Guillermo del Toro, the director, is presenting a project that's been a long time in the works, Frankenstein, and closer to home, Paolo Sorrentino, probably Italy's most famous living director, has a film called La Grazia, which is about doubt, love, responsibility, but the main character is the president of Italy, a fictional character called Mariano de Santis. Like many events, Chris, slightly being overshadowed by what's happening in Gaza. There's been an organisation called Venice for Palestine movement, which is roughly 1,500 members of the Italian cinema industry that wrote this letter to the Venice Film Festival, referring to what's happening there as a genocide. So obviously a lot of talk about these films and those two big ones I mentioned, but Gaza is also set to be at the forefront of this festival this year.
Politics certainly can't escape, or culture cannot escape politics these days. But finally, Ed, we did want to turn our attention to the Tomatina Festival in Spain, celebrating its 80th anniversary, although from what I've heard from our producer, I'd much rather discuss the fact that you've been pelted with oranges yourself in Italy.
Where do we start? I mean, El País says it's the 78th edition, although I have seen it appear as the 80th, so that fact is contested. Yeah, the Tomatina de Buñol, been going since 1945, so you can do your maths there. In Valencia, this town of just over 9,000 people swells to 22,000 as between 120,000 and 150,000 kilos of tomatoes get pelted in this 1 hour fight. What I didn't actually know before because I've never been, is that the event starts with someone trying to climb up a greasy pole to retrieve a ham. Something that no one was able to achieve last year, but apparently...
Where does the ham come in with the tomatoes? How does
I don't know. It's how the tomatina starts. Just great Spanish produce. That you climb up this pole and retrieve the ham. An Indian did it in record time this year, apparently. Some talk about food waste, but these are very, very mature tomatoes, apparently. Also to make sure it doesn't hurt you too much. That would not be fit for human consumption, we're told. Well, and yes, I have been pelted with oranges,
which are far harder, which are far worse than these mature tomatoes that you're describing. Do you still have the bruise?
At the carnival in Ivrea, which it used to be stones, and they decided that it might be better to do oranges. It's sort of a reenactment of this medieval legend in the Piedmont town of Ivrea, and just instead of in tomatoes there are oranges. And I had I think it was about 3 or 4 at the time, son in my arms. I was meant to be in the kind of kiddie area that was meant to be all gentle, and I received an orange clock in the middle of my forehead.
Well, at least it was you instead of your son, frankly.
Exactly. I took one for the team.
Take one for the team. Ed Stalker, always taking one for the team. Monocle's Europe editor-at-large. Thanks for joining us. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. This is The Briefing, and we're going to end our show with a musical cultural interlude for our listeners, because I'm joined by Monocle's Associate Editor for Culture, Sophie Monaghan-Coombs. Good afternoon, Sophie.
Good afternoon, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you here. We are taking people back in this segment because you've recently arranged an interview with one of the musical icons of the 90s.
Yes, we have just had St. Etienne on Monocle on Culture this week in the show that came out on Monday. And as you say, they are musical icons of the 90s, but they have never gone away. They've been recording music ever since and become a very beloved British pop band in the interim. And we'll talk about it in a moment, I'm sure, but this is their final album. So we really wanted to have them on the show, and it felt very special.
British pop band. I understood looking back that they sort of were in this genre that was called indie dance.
Yes, so they came out of the 90s, and yeah, as you say, they're sort of indie dance, synth pop. It's kind of associated with labels like Factory Records or groups like New Order, and they're very danceable. It's very kind of poppy, it's very clubby, but there's proper lyrics in there, there's proper melodies, there's lots of alternative and rock elements,
and they very dancey but also very easy listening at the same time.
Yes, exactly.
Quite relaxing.
Yeah, it works just as well kind of in the background of a dinner party as it does on the dance floor.
It worked well as a background writing the script for this show.
Okay, testing it out in new places.
I was. So okay, they're on 13 albums, lucky number 13. How has their style evolved over that time? I mean, as you say, they've never gone away, but how do you maintain a relevance as an artist over that many decades?
It's a good question. I think, to be honest, when they started out in the 90s, they were incorporating lots of samples and different elements of music from the 60s and the 70s. So for me, I think their kind of sound has never sounded particularly of a time. It's very timeless. There's one song on this new album, Take Me to the Pilot, one of the singles, and I think it's great. It's so catchy, and it sounds like it could have come out at any time in their history. And one of the songs which, made them really famous that was on that first album was a Neil Young cover of Only Love Can Break Your Heart, which is quite a sort of, I don't know, it's quite a bold thing to do. And, you might think that a Neil Young song might be sacrosanct, and they make a completely different, very dancey track with that same song. So I think they've always been picking up elements from different eras, and that's sort of why they've been able to carry on for so long, so successfully.
It is a completely different style, absolutely. So now, why is this the last album, can you tell us? Have they just decided that this is the end?
Basically.
Simple as that.
They've been around for so long. It's their 13th album, as we've said. And I think, Sarah Cracknell, the lead singer, just said she wanted to go out on a high. She's really proud of everything they've done. She wanted to continue to be proud of everything that they've made. And she just sort of wanted to have that intact. So just decided that now is the right moment. One thing I would say, which I think is really lovely, is that they're not splitting up. They're obviously still very good friends, and they want to tour. They want to have more time for touring. And I think one thing that's really nice is that, often you go and you see a band that you really love play songs from their new album, and it's sometimes a bit disappointing because you don't know the album as well, and you just want to hear the bangers from the past.
Everyone wants to hear the classics.
Exactly. You just want to hear the greatest hits. And so now they're saying, look, we can, we'll tour with all of our enormous back catalogue, and we'll just choose the best bits and our favourite songs and our audience's favourite songs. So I think that's a really exciting and really positive thing. They're not going away. They're just going to stop releasing new music.
Very interesting. Well, we're going to hear a little clip from the interview that Rob Bound held. Tell us what we're going to hear.
Yes, so we spoke to Pete and Sarah, two members of this 3-member band. And let's hear Pete talking a little bit about how you collaborate and, as a group, create lyrics within a band.
I often get ideas in the shower, and it's quite hard to write things down. I've tried.
Pete Wiggs in his wet whiteboard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Soap on the thing.
Which thing?
That's why the words are so weird, because I can't read them. No, often it's a tune or something, and I'm like, right, I've got to keep that in my head, and then run downstairs. But it's because sometimes if you do, I think it's, I don't know, different maybe to writing a book or something. Sometimes if I just sit in front of and go, right, inspiration, come, it doesn't. And then you sit there wasting time. And it's often you need to go out, go for a walk, being somewhere else, then the ideas sometimes come.
Pops into your head.
Yeah, no, I agreed.
And
totally.
sometimes I don't know where, the tune, I just write one and then I go, I don't know where that came from, but hopefully not from someone else. some advert from the 70s.
Your secret's safe with Alice, Pete. It's going to be fine.
Someone would point it out, your melody's the theme to the clangers. Oh no.
Yeah. I knew that from somewhere. Yeah. What about you, Sarah? Is it the same for you, or are you sitting at a desk? Are you on voice notes thinking what will stick, I wonder?
I'm very much with Pete. It sort of comes to you. And sometimes we'll be in the studio and we need like a second or third verse. And we'll go, right, come on then. We've got a piece of paper each and a pen. And it's like pulling teeth sometimes. It's so difficult.
Sometimes it happens the other way around. You've got a good kind of idea and then you can see a melody that goes with that. But it's often not that way.
I wanted to ask you quickly about samples. This is the new record, International. We hear a little bit of Swedish, Japanese, German. You accuse Pete of being his main inspiration being Mothra, which begs the question, A, why Pete, and who is your Godzilla?
Ooh, good question. Get out of that, Pete.
Yeah. I don't know. I wouldn't call Sarah Godzilla. Most of those snippets, they're sort of based on stories from throughout our checkered history. Some aren't, but some of them I can't even remember what they are because they've been translated.
Some of them are like quotes, aren't they, from reviews and things like that.
Yeah, the Japanese one, which is non-Mothra related, but we did a gig once in Japan, and this guy came up to us afterwards and said that we had a punk rock attitude, and I was like, oh, thanks. And he went, no, that's not a good thing.
In a negative.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
You got to stop spitting on your fans, Pete. I think that's what he meant. It's a very polite society.
Take me to the pilot. I feel I need to fly now. Another reason why now. And you won't recognize me. Take me to the pilot.
Saint-Etienne there. That was Pete Wiggs and Sarah Cracknell of Saint-Etienne joining Rob Bound on Monocle on Culture. Their final album, International, is out on next week, 5th of September, via Heavenly Records. You can listen to the full interview on monocle.com. Also check out the full archive of Monocle on Culture. Sophie Monaghan-Coombs, thank you very much for joining us as well. And that's all the time we have for this edition of The Briefing, produced by Laura Kramer. Our researcher was Henry King, and our studio manager was Flynn Simons, with editing assistance from Steph Chungu. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Chris Termek. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.